how I would want people 30 years later to remember the emotional history of our times, not the factual history of our time. उसको लिखने के लिए बहुत लोग हैं. Who am I? I'm a comic book artist. We're a comic book artist. We live in another world.
What do you think is the role of creativity and dystopic storytelling in the context of understanding people-centric energy transition?
So we have instances of climate writing. What works is like at a much deeper behavioural changes, and for that you need people to write fiction. You need people with imagination. Leaving something this important to climate policymakers would be a very short-sighted idea. I mean, it might be a failure of our own education system that, we have all sort of pushed into reading just non-fiction, just information. Information is cheap. It's available. It's the emotion we are talking about. To live within a world of imagination is very critical, almost as critical as climate science. So there should be a collaboration. If you're exploring that world through comics, I mean, if I'm dealing with your subjects, I don't want your terminologies to be kind of put in like, I will do it in different ways. And I think that kind of trust, mutual trust, needs to develop between these two worlds.
The world that you build, in the context of the society right now we are, do you think belief also will exist?
It's a belief-based society, right? If a person believes, then logic does not really work. So a parallel narrative, a different kind of narrative has to come out to tackle that kind of a question.
Welcome to the Energy Transition Dialogue series, where we generally talk of several issues on people-centric energy transition. But today, for the first time, we are drifting and going to a different phase by bridging climate, animation, art, critical thinking and creative storytelling. So we have Mr. Sarnath Banerjee with us, and so we were actually waiting for him to join in this conversation. He has written the book All Quiet in Vikaspuri by HarperCollins, which is a very interesting take on dystopia, water distress, and bridges climate science, sustainability, and creative storytelling. Thank you, Sarnath, for joining us.
Thank you.
In this series. So, may I start with the first question, or this is more of a conversation with you, that what do you think is the role of creativity and dystopic storytelling in the context of understanding or addressing issues of people-centric energy transition?
Let's start with what has been the problem. The problem has been there's what I call a critical imagination deficit. While on our way, when we were discussing climate conversation and climate communication, leaving something this important to climate policymakers or climate scientists would be a very short-sighted idea. Because what we'll have is very information-based works, which would, of course, kind of make you will be alarmist, and which will be about like, the general depletion of the world and society and etc. and all the problems that are happening. But unless it is felt at an emotional level, unless you know what is actually like slight bits of changes that are happening in the world, and you can perceive it through your imagination, through oneself, nothing's going to happen. What works is, all that sort of at a much deeper behavioural changes. And for that, you need people to write fiction. You need people with imagination. You need people who have different ways of thinking. And we've all grown up with climate-related conversations and climate-related films. With the Tita Ekti Nodin Naam, there was about two rivers, Diper Naam Tiarong. And this was, and you see, and climate policymakers or climate activists, one should not even expect them to write stories like that. It is a story that would come out from a human experience of having lived there. When you know that the person, that was a masjid, you come out of the house, you see the masjid, and then next morning when you come out of it, you don't see the masjid anymore, then you see it floating half a kilometer away from your house. That feeling, that psychological stuff is very important. And I also feel that we've learned all these things. In our school, I remember like in ICSE, I remember there was a story about this Japanese man who, this story is about like a sea retreats in a small island in Western Japan. And because it's a spectacle, when the sea retreats and you see all the debris of things, things people have lost, etc., people get like almost hypnotically drawn towards the sea, and they walk through that seabed for almost a kilometer, But the old man who's 90-year-old knows what is going to happen. The sea is going to bounce back with like complete, and there's no way to stop these people from, heading, to their death. So he burns up the village storehouse, meaning like the crop storehouse, to get, so then people came running and therefore saves the village. So we have instances of climate writing, except the policy people are not geared. I mean, it might be a failure of our own education system that we have all sort of pushed into reading just non-fiction, just information. Information is cheap. It's available. It's the emotion we're talking about. Information is ChatGPT. So I think that's where there's a critical thing, I feel, which people who are whose business it is to live within a world of imagination is very critical, almost as critical as climate science.
So with this orientation only, so when I started my dystopic science fiction on sustainability with the Lucy series, this emotional hauntology was pushing me. And I felt that that's where the role of fiction, creative storytelling, is to bring something haunting, the loss of the memory, the trauma of the memory, identity crisis, together with a creative punch, which can shaken up the emotion and places the emotion in the right context. You think the time has come when people like you will also need to be mainstreamed and join the negotiation platforms of COP? Because I was deeply bored. I mean, I went to COP in 2006-7 and then I realized it's better I write science fiction or dystopic science fiction. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are mixed. One of the ways of continuing to do what I do is by protecting myself from the mainstream. One of the ways I protect myself is stay away from social media, for example, so at least my imagination stays pure, and therefore I can kind of see things which people have become blind to. Beneath Noida, there's another Noida. There's a phantom Noida. You need to be a little bit on the spectrum to kind of come up with interesting ideas, because the mainstream is just plumbing their information in your direction, and therefore these information just becomes like sort of when you overuse certain words, they just become ineffective. You mentioned a very interesting word in your question, haunting. The idea of being haunted, the idea of uncanny. Uncanny is something that actually builds its nest on the normal. Uncanny is one of the first things that happen when you actually face a certain climatic discrepancy, whether it's rain in Sindh or fishiculture in Sindh. And uncanny is and haunted by when you break down a certain building that has existed for many years and was your landmark for many years, the shadow remains after the building is broken. Or the fact that some sangsad comes across from my street and wants the istriwala, who's been the holder of that neighborhood for many years, knows childhood secrets of various people there, secures the houses. The Vidayak comes and wants to take away space because he wants his second car to kind of park there. And some people will speculate that all these sort of popular forms of narrative that we are getting all the time is kind of desensitizing us and othering the people. This government has managed to figure out other certain groups of people, whether it's like economically marginalized or religious marginalized. So this othering is happening at various levels, even among us.
So in the people centricity context, so I will again take a cue from what you said. So for instance, a coal mine which has stayed for the last 70, 72, 74 years, suddenly that goes away or phases down, or it goes beyond 2050, it stops. So we have been thinking for a long time, and for instance, that's the hauntology of that going away, the trauma, the memory, the loss of the emotion of that going away, which often pushes me to think that there were roles of people, creative people like you, who will actually question the government and put a mirror to push them to think that, okay, approach the policy lens from these emotions or of this ontological lens.
Absolutely.
The transition is not only just about numbers.
Absolutely.
It's about your real identity, your symbolic identity,
Absolutely.
your imaginary identity. So what are your thoughts about?
Very good question, Anandu. I mean, it is making me think. I think one of the things one can do is individualize stories. What we do is like communication is always collective. If you remember when we were younger, a Bangladesh story is important only when 400 people die of a boat capsizing, right? An individual story of Bangladesh is not interesting. While a tourist goes in Bali and gets kidnapped, or like a Swedish tourist environment, that becomes like a national news in Sweden or whatever in the world for like about a week. So this is, we've sort of grown up with this sort of
Right.
a sort of slight mild racism, media racism as we call, like, because whose life is what the value of life. So yeah, 300 Bangladeshi and 150 Indians, 400 Afghans equals to 10 British person. Kind of that kind of, there was like
True.
guerrilla mathematics of
True.
depravity that we'd all grow up, and that's still there. Which is why when I live in Europe, so when I see news that is coming out from climate basic news, first of all, it's this huge fear that all these people are going to come and take over our lovely world in Europe. Our meadows, our fields, our like delicate ways of living, our Heimat is all going to kind of go down the drains because of all these sort of people are coming desperate. And also, when we talk about these people, we talk of them as collective. This collective global south is trying to kind of come towards us, and we do the same to our people as well here. We collectivize them. The collective problem to people like Paraspura and Orissa and things like that. But the strength of climate related narrative is to individualize those stories, to kind of actually make it like stories that could be yours, could be mine, and that is very important. What we are seeing with Palestine also, what they've done is that they've collectivized Gaza. So individualization is very important, and no matter how much you try, because of different skills, people who work within these worlds, economics and climate, because of different skills. I mean, for example, I would not know what all these sort of number crunching is all about. It's not my work. I don't want to even to get into that. So there should be a collaboration, and there should be an understanding between these two people, and let that person do their own idea of whatever they're working on, whether it's short termism, whether it's optimism of like this techno optimism such as Bangalore people have, whatever the person is like. If you're exploring that world through comics, I mean, if I'm dealing with those subjects, I will do it in different ways, and I think that kind of mutual trust needs to develop between these two worlds. Well, it's not happening right now, which is why we all work individually.
So the latest information pact of COP30 for the first time legitimizes in a way that the time has come. We do a better climate communication in a better way. And I feel when I was thinking about it, I think people like you or me who were working with ontology, emotions, dystopia, do you think we have a role in that pact through our creativity, through our this individualization, through our real symbolic and identity lenses to question, to bring that pact into fruition or implementation and try to be a bridge in future? What are your thoughts?
It's a belief based society, right? If I believe that climate is like a slow progression, it is not going to happen in 3 lifetimes, then it's a belief that I have. It is all, current politics is run by belief systems, right? So post truth belief, not post belief system, is where we are. It is belief based, and that is where the challenge is. If a person believes, then logic does not really work. So every time you put forth 20 different logical ways to kind of pounce on Trump, it doesn't work. It just gives him a lot more strength, right? Because he feels relevant, he's always there, sort of a thing. So a strategy, I don't want to use the word strategy because strategy means that you need like some kind of design to kind of come up with this idea. A parallel narrative, a different kind of narrative has to come out to tackle that kind of a question where people don't really believe. I mean, you can give them as many facts about like things depleting, energy transfer is good, as long as they don't believe it, as long as they don't sort of convinced by it, they're not going to work in. And that's where fundamentally there's a communication gap. There's a cognitive dissonance between what communication people are trying to kind of do and what is actually achieving. I mean, I find the story of depletion of a way of life in Jangpura much more powerful than that kind of sort of a thing. And one has to understand. So when All Quiet in Vikaspuri is a disguise. It's a disguise. I mean, it is basically about different neighborhoods. It's about Jangpura fighting with Jorbag. It's about Panchil trying to develop its own nuclear power power plant. It is about various neighborhoods of Delhi fighting with each other over water. And there's a person who's a villain, Rastogi. He himself has suffered water apartheid because certain neighborhoods don't get water, certain neighborhoods. So he's a villain, but he's also not a villain. It talks about distress sales because like people are trying to this water they're using as distress sale to make properties in Gurgaon and depleting the city of its people. Now, all these are like real or ordinary stuff that is happening everywhere all the time, right? And the water thing was just kind of came up. The water wars just came up, this looking for river Saraswati, which was a myth, at least when I started writing the book. I don't know whether it's science right now, nobody knows. The Saraswati Sena, these are people we know, cadres of political parties and various people, they have foot soldiers. So these are, and then of course the topics like short-termism and all that. So it came from a place of joy, radical joy to write that book. It was not, some institute of environment planning said that, oh, Banerjee, there are 20 points you need to kind of get into this book, and then तो वही तो हो रहा है 20 points लिख के यहाँ पे पहुँचे हैं हम. None of that work kind of amounts to anything. अब तो गैस जलाने का भी ज़रूरत नहीं पड़ता, लाइटर होता है. So that's not even worth that kind of stuff. Unless it kind of hits what we perceive, what our life, at a psychological level, I don't think we're getting anywhere.
So may I ask you finally the penultimate and the conclusive question is that the world that you built in your book also is a place of multiple desires, and it's a space where everyone is having different desire structures. So belief that you are saying is also being programmed in that world or the metaverse. So in the context of the society right now do you think belief also will exist?
I did create this world full of characters because the city where I live in, or whichever city whoever lives in, are an encyclopedia of people, places and characters, right? And also full of institutions and people you don't want to become. I do believe that institutions should just exist so that you don't become like them. So my universe, this encyclopedia of people, places that I've created, are part of this world this is Delhi. This is the world I inhabit. And सभी के अपने अपने desires है, सभी के अपने अपने शौक है, और इनको ये शौक फरमाना चाहिए. They have to kind of continue living their life, and when you have created the tone and the atmosphere and the place, this metaverse as you called, or modern canvas that you've called, the characters behave themselves on their own accord. You don't have so much agency anymore. वो खुद ही करते हैं जो उनको करना है. वो खुद ही एक serviceman is stealing water from the neighbor's house. There's a corrupt clerk. There's a tanker guy who kind of sucks in water from farmhouses. There are all these characters who just appear. The structure also appears because I've used Homer's Odyssey as the central structure, which is also metaverse. Homer goes out and meets different, not Homer Simpson, Homer as in Ulysses. So all these things that have happened, so it is a tribute to the world. It is how I would want people 30 years later to remember the history of our times, the emotional history of our times, not the factual history of our time. उसको लिखने के लिए बहुत लोग हैं. And I just don't want it to be synthetic, artificial. I just want people to just live that world, and within that belief system, multiple beliefs, हज़ारों ख्वाहिशें, they want to live within their हज़ारों ख्वाहिशें. And yeah, and who am I? I'm a comic book artist. It's a modest place to be in, which is a very good place because it doesn't have that masculine knowledge aspect to it. People don't have to throw information at each other, some game of information throwing. We are comic book artists. We live in another world.
It was lovely chatting with you, Sarnath. And one punchline that I got after this fantastic conversation with Sarnath is the emotional history will decide people centricity and people centric energy transition. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You got that.